Hi, my name is Chris. On this channel, we talk about Deltarune. In this video, we're going to talk about Deltarune, we're going to talk about Brandish, and we're going to talk about Chrono Trigger. But before all of that, we're going to talk about Toby Fox's personal definition of what is and is not a parallel narrative. Because you might have your definition of what a parallel narrative is and how to use it. I might have my definition of what a parallel narrative is and how to use it. But the only definition that actually matters is Toby Fox's definition. Or a better way of putting that is, the most useful definition for us to be working with is Toby Fox's definition. So, without further ado, let's get up the window here. Oh, I should mention that we're going to finish off by looking at a little bit of thematics in Cyber City as well. So let's start off now by talking about Toby Fox and how does Toby Fox define parallel narrative. I've got quotations and citations for this because I know that this is a hot topic from one of the last videos here. Alright, we have this operant quote here. The next adventure in the Undertale series has arrived. Fight or spare alongside new characters in Undertale's parallel story, Deltarune. Well, that doesn't quite tell us what a parallel story is yet, but it does nail down that Deltarune is a parallel story. So, we have a Q&A from the past about this. How does this game relate to the Undertale? Is it a sequel? Please don't worry too much about that. Essentially, this is not the world of Undertale. If you completed Undertale, the ending and the world are as you left it. If everyone was happy there, the people in Undertale world will still be happy. So please, don't worry about those characters and that world. It will remain untouched. To rephrase that, Deltarune's world is a different one, with different characters that have lived different lives. And a whole new story will happen. I don't know what you call this kind of game. Ultimately, they settled in on parallel narrative. It's just a game that you can play after you complete Undertale if you want to. If you want to is a very strange clause there at the end, because I think an entire comment section could explode around the concept of, is it, if you want to, you can play this game after you complete Undertale, as in, it doesn't matter what order you do it in. And then the other side of the conversation would naturally say, oh, there's causality here, with the other side of the conversation rebutting and saying, well, everything he said above that would say that there's not causality here, that this is a parallel story with different lives. So, if you want to is certainly subject to debate. I completely appreciate that. I just tend to think that if you want to debate, that you kind of have to work it out against everything else above here. So we have another question. So there's no connection between the two games. Answer. It's a different world that might even have different rules. That doesn't mean there will be no connections at all, though. I think this really clarifies the latter answer, right? It's a different world. It's a different story. It's going to connect back to Undertale. So, for example, if you want to understand Undyne in this game, it helps to understand Undyne in Undertale. There's no denying that, right? If you want to understand Asgore in this game, it helps to understand Asgore in Undertale because you understand where all the flowers and all of that stuff come from. So, in this sense, I think Toby is saying the characters do kind of get established in Undertale, so you should at least familiarize with them. But then he goes out of his way to say different. You want to count the difference here? That sounds like fun media, right? We've got 1 different, 2 difference, 3 difference, 4 difference, 5 difference. He says different quite a lot in these two little excerpts here. So here's what I've come up with, gleaning through what Toby Fox has said. A parallel narrative is, as defined by Toby Fox, the same characters, but also new characters. For example, Susie. We have different rules, notably monsters bleeding. We have a different world. We have different lives, which means different backstories. We have a different story, as in a different past and also a different progression of events. Notably, we're not spending the entire game Brandish style, tease for the next section here, entirely underground, right? We now are actually in the light world. We're coming in and out of it. We're going different places. And most notably, this is not the world of Undertale. Hometown is its own world, and I mean, we will discuss this undoubtedly in future videos. Just the relationship of where humans come from relative to hometown indicates that this is a very different sort of world than the Undertale world, and where the monsters are underground and the humans are all above, right? Like, this is very different. The monsters live above ground, right? There's a big difference. But I also wanted to pull Gerson, or actually, I really want to clarify this. I think we need to refer to the tortoise, and he is defined as a tortoise in the game. I've seen the quote for this. The tortoise in the Dark World, we need to call them the old man. There's enough of a difference between the way Gerson speaks in Deltarune relative to the old man, who is way more casual, and you might say Gerson chilled with age, and I'm willing to grant that. This is not a hill I'm remotely interested in dying on at all. But I would submit to you that the old man in the Dark World, even if you don't buy that, right, is actually like not Gerson. It's like a Darkner based off of Gerson. It's close enough, but we should just call the character in the Dark World who is reminiscent of Gerson the old man. I think we can all understand who the old man is, and I also think there's a thematic reason why this is going to be useful as well. So stay with me here. All right. So here's some lines from Gerson that I think will talk about parallel narratives as well. Just a character from that old story. The Lord of the Hammer. Hell if I'm reading that. Though, wait a second. Isn't that what Dragon Blazers was based off of? Yup. And so they changed parts of the story. Of course, the biggest fans got mad. But isn't it interesting? The book was already just an interpretation of something else. Stories can be retold. They can be changed. That's what I believe. Let's play with this for a second here. The book was already just an interpretation of something else. I think we can play with this and say that Undertale is Toby Fox's take on Brandish with other elements that Toby was kicking around, but there's a ton of Brandish going on in Undertale, just in the thematics of falling down underground and having to work your way back out of the underground, right? Then we have the biggest fans got mad, but isn't it interesting? I think this means that there's going to be big differences between Deltarune and Undertale. Toby is not trying to make Undertale 2. And to this point, they changed parts of the story. We'll get a little bit more of this here. Let's continue on. Well, thanks for the tea, old man. We got to get back to our hero stuff. Will you come by my study later? Yeah, sure. Not like we got a choice. Ain't no better story than one told with sparkling eyes. She ain't got no fear, that one. Doubt, irony, that's what poisons your story. That and too much predictability. I think what Toby is saying here with this line, through the old man, is that one of the very important things to do in doing a parallel narrative is not do the same story twice. I don't think it is likely that Toby is going to outright steal the finish from any other established piece of media. I think the focus here on that line about predictability means that Toby wants where the story ends to be a different and authentic and original place. So while there will be lots of thematic elements, as we just heard with the Dragon Blazers quote here, one thing that I feel pretty certain on in reading Toby's words himself is that we are not going to get a predictable ending. This is to say, the ending is not going to be, for example, as I've joked around in other videos, Star Wars, right? Or even Chrono Trigger, right? I don't think the roaring is going to be akin to Lavos. Although you can draw analogies between the Titans and Lavos, absolutely. I don't think they're going to function the exact same way. I certainly don't think, for example, the Titans came from outer space and are effectively an alien, right? I think we're going in a very different direction even with that finish in and of itself. And that's what I'm talking about when we're talking about thematics here. Next, we have, throughout my career, some of my best ideas came from dreams. Just in case you weren't sure that Toby speaks through Gerson, this is a Gerson quote on the tombstone, or actually like by the bench. Take a rest here. If anyone asks, you're writing. Such a story created for such a simple purpose. I mean, I think, the most important thing here is my best ideas come from dreams. Once again, we're connecting Gerson and the old man back to Toby. This is not, I think, groundbreaking lore analysis here, but I think when we start stacking all of this stuff together, we do see a picture of what Toby Fox means by parallel narratives very clearly. And I think Toby was getting closer to that in this most recent newsletter. If you want to see what I had to say about that, please go and check out that video after this one here. Here's another one. This is a fun one from Alphys in the library in the Kid Zone. And let me tell you, it makes Mew Mew 1 look like a dumpster fire with sparkly cat ears, with darker storylines and mature themes. The second one treats the viewer like a real adult. Now, understand that we could connect this back to the Mantle game, which is kind of what Ram says, and there's a bit of like an Alphys Ram connection, which is strange. Don't want to dwell on that too long, but like it's a bit weird, right? But I think the better way of reading this is Alphys is again speaking for Toby, saying Undertale was dealing with more late teen themes, right down to Toby's exploration of violence and pacifism in that game, right? That you really can't get the true ending without being pacifistic. Well, my opinion is that in Chapter 4 with the Titan, Toby is making a slightly more nuanced statement that pacifism is generally the way to go, but sometimes you do actually have to fight for things. And even if you don't fully agree with that read, just the Titan fight alone suggests more complexities than Undertale, right? It is a darker, and this is a darker game than Undertale. I think that is not particularly controversial at all. Here's another one. And so the story goes, and so the story goes, but ain't every story better with a little twist? Predictability, twists. Predictability, twists. The most important thing here, especially I have seen occasionally people go, oh, there's not going to be a twist. Oh, no, there is certainly going to be a twist. Toby is signposting this so hard to the point where some of these lines would be hard to reconcile later if there isn't a big twist. These are all coming out of the character in the game. Let me see, is there anything good in the fairy tale thing? Oh, no, that's just, I was looking for tail. I guess I must have just left that in here. All right, 5 key takeaways from this section, though, with all of these excerpts and how it connects back to Deltarune. Dragon Blazers was based on Lord of the Hammer, and they changed parts of the story in such a way that was dramatic enough that it made a lot of the old-timey fans and the long-timey fans kind of mad. They were key elements of the story that were changed. Stories can be retold, perhaps should be retold. And the implication is that they should definitely be changed on the retelling. It is great, very cool, as Toby might say, to borrow elements from your favorite band or favorite video game, for example, to build your current video game. And if we're thinking about a video game, maybe you want to do a platformer. Maybe you love Mega Man. It's cool to borrow some of the themes of Mega Man. What's not great to do, for example, is basically carbon copy Mega Man. Just to give a quick example here. You need to do something novel with the concept to elevate it. Hollow Knight is a wonderful game. But the best way I can put this is there's a quote from Lupin III, one of the English translations. It's stuck in my head since I was a teen, which is, a copy of a beautiful thing is inherently an ugly thing. And I think if Toby is not familiar with that quote, that is certainly something, a feeling that Toby shares. It's lovely to have influences, but you've got to build on top of them. Let's talk about the parallel narratives and the thematics. Speaking of parallel narratives and thematics, here's some great ones from Brandish. I went on a crash course at Brandish University here over the last couple of days. I need to thank the Hanged Man. Check out his video. He was super helpful, super friendly to me. Go over to his channel, subscribe. He pointed me in the direction of Daniel Movie Production. He had a vid as well. They had a vid. Daniel Movie Productions had a vid, and I grabbed this quote from there, the first one I'm going to read, and I watched the video, but there's not really a ton of overlap with what I'm trying to do and what Daniel Movie Production is doing, even though thematically similar. We're going to start off in completely different places here, and I think we're going to end up in different places. Not that like one of us says Brandish is connected and the other one doesn't. It's just we're going down different lanes. However, it is important to me, especially in the body of your work, if you are going to use material of others, to cite and give credit to other people. So that includes, music. If you're going to use music from other people, better be giving credit and make sure you got permission. Just cover your bases on this sort of stuff. That stuff's all very, very important inside the body of your text. All right, so this is my first quote. This is from Toby Fox about Brandish. This is going to set us up. Varric, real name Ares, is the main character bounty hunter of the Brandish series. An incredibly obscure SNES, PC Engine, PC98 action puzzle RPG hybrid lauded for the incredibly bad controls. What does Toby mean by this? Just to give you the quickest framework on this. You don't turn in Brandish. The world turns, and you stand still. So if you want to turn the map, it turns. There's 4 different maps, and the map just turns. It is very confusing. Continuing on with the Toby reading here. I really, really like the music. Cosign. Hard cosign on that. That is a very good soundtrack. The atmosphere, and for some reason, I love the gameplay. Not sure I get that one. Originally, I just wanted to make a Brandish hack because Brandish is pretty Halloween-y already. It has a real creepy life or death atmosphere about it. Then I thought of the Andonuts thing, and I figured that Varric was as good of a silent protagonist as any to fill the role all right. And I think that this is very important because, obviously the first really close tie-in is Chris and Varric are extraordinarily cosmetically similar. And obviously Varric has also been used in the Halloween hack. So there's a very, very, very strong thematic through line between Varric and Chris and Varric in the Halloween hack. And I would throw in a couple of other characters that are clearly relevant to the story of this game thematically, which would be Chrono and Link. And I think we could do a deeper breakdown at another time of Varric, Link, Chrono, and Chris, and kind of what does that tell us when we consider them all in the mix together. But that's not where I want to go right this second here. I want to talk about the shopkeepers down here, the old man in particular, and just these shopkeepers. All of the shopkeepers mirror the despair of the Darkners. They feel as though they have been forgotten down here. Very, very, very strong theming to Card Kingdom here. They feel that they have been forgotten down here. We're going to get Sham theming very hard here in just a second. And they do not think that they will ever escape and that there is no hope for them ultimately. Extraordinarily Rousey-like. Some music tie-ins I found when I was working through the soundtrack. Lantern is very similar to Shop 1. And all of the shopkeepers mirror Sham's sense of futility and hopelessness. You can see it right there. The kind of just waiting around. Shop 2 does go funky. This is in Brandish, just like Hip Shop does in Deltarune. Ancient Statue borrows from Tubular Bells by Mike Oldfield. This is going to be my music recommendation to mid-video here. If you have not checked out Tubular Bells yet, you should, because Tubular Bells is so important to the history of video game soundtracking, especially in this era. Secret of Evermore utilizes Tubular Bells very, very heavily. Listen to that, then go fire up the Secret of Evermore soundtrack, and there's a tone and a general rhythm to the bass part on Tubular Bells, and you will start to notice that bum 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 bo doo 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 bum 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 bum, that kind of rhythm all over video game soundtracks from the late 80s into the mid 90s. Tubular Bells, really important. That bass figure and the repeating ostinato pattern is an Ancient Statue. Tower's snare rolls are echoed in Chapter 4's Ever Higher. So check out Tower from Brandish and Chapter 4's Ever Higher. Now, let's talk about this character. Boy, this was when I was like, I appear to have found pay dirt. The old man. This town, the rocks, the whole world is just an illusion. This place is nothing more than a nightmare. You're in it, and so am I. There's no way out. See, look at this. My feet have turned to stone. I cannot move at all anymore. I no longer hunger, nor do I thirst, but I am so very lonely. Be kind to an old man. Stay here with me, forever. I think there are lines for, by my count, 4 different characters just in the old man alone. This place is just an illusion. I can't quite place that. We have my feet turned to stone, just like Lancer. We have I no longer hunger, nor do I thirst, just like Des. This whole world is just an illusion. I believe that is Sham. And I think there's probably another line buried in there as well. Here's some other thematic tie-ins. We have an armor of darkness. When the armor of darkness is put on, a ghost takes over your body, and you cannot move. This armor is a very strong armor, but it comes with an incredible catch. There is also a twisted key. This, not from Deltarune, though we see it in Chapter 3 in Tenna's game. Nope, this is also from Brandish. Here is the approach to Azidahakra. I think I said that right. God, I hope I said that right. I don't have the word in front of me right now. So we'll find out in just a second. And it looks very reminiscent to the approach to facing off against the knight as we go up against them in Chapter 4. We have the deserted room. And then some more images here. These are very reminiscent of the animated scenes, right? We got the 3 dragons. This Titan, the 2 knights, right? Feels very familiar. This is Azidahaka. I got that pretty close. Azidahaka's really interesting. Here's where I want to tie this back in to Gerson and everything he said. Azidahaka is not just a dragon, and this is where my man, the Hanged Man, put this all together for me. Azidahaka might very well be the first dragon, which is to say, all stories based off of dragons through all of the world. Some people believe, I don't know, I'm not versed enough on this to know one way or another, but Hangman did a lot of research on this, really thoroughgoing works cited over there. I think Hangman's completely on point with this. A lot of people believe Azidahakra is the first dragon in all of mythology, which means throughout all of time, the story of the dragon, obviously relevant to Deltarune, has been told. This might be one of the oldest stories ever told. Now, how we use the dragon, how we deploy the dragon, how we twist and turn it, we actually can see some of this in Brandish as well. So, in Iranian mythology, Azidahakra is an evil dragon, and later, I guess, turned into a king. Again, not an expert on this. This is where I'm fuzzy wuzzers and I'm trusting my sources. Turned in, and then in Brandish, the writers, after finding this myth, playing around with it, they're like, no, we're going to turn Azidahakra into a benevolent dragon, and the story is that this king, Barabbas, is basically going to become content, fat, greedy, sort of like a who do you kill when the whole kingdom's at peace sort of thing, like peace is boring, and decide that he wants to go after Azidahakra to attain Azidahakra's power. Azidahakra decides to sacrifice themselves. I don't know. I had no idea. Azidahakra decides to sacrifice themselves, and that transforms the king into an evil monster. So it is not the dragon that is evil, it is the human that is evil. This is interesting. I think this might actually suggest some night thematic connections, right? That essentially finding the dragon's power, or trying to get the dragon's power, brought out the absolute worst in Barabbas. Barabbas went from being an evil, greedy dude to becoming a terrible and horrific monster at the end of the game. All right, so here's one of the cutscenes that's kind of similar too. Now, as a bonus round to this video, I wanted to go back to Chrono Trigger, mainly after Brandish, where I'm like, ooh, I don't know that I really understand this game. I think I understand this game. I think I've got enough here to work with. I think I can rock with this enough now to talk about thematic elements of Brandish in the future with some quality citation. Chrono Trigger, though, I know it. I lived Chrono Trigger. I wanted to do some character thematics on Chrono Trigger. Chris connects back to Chrono. We can break this down a number of different ways. I think the silent protagonist with a sword. Varric has a knife, Chrono has a sword, and Chris's weapon in the dark world is kind of like straddling the line. It's like Chris has a knife in the light world and a sword in the dark world. The opening cutscene where Chris is awoken by Toriel is straight up lifted from Chrono's mom awakening Chrono. We are obviously playing with themes of going into the past, just like Chrono Trigger does. And I think it's obvious of all the characters, who's the central one that we are mostly playing through. It's Chris. Next, we have Luca, who is Chrono's best friend. This is Susie. I understand how Chapter 5 with the festival has confused. And that's fair. That is fair. That is so fair. Chapter 5, with all the love lines, storylines of the festival, is confusing. However, I think if we are looking at this through thematics, who is the tightest, most obvious fit for Luca? It's gotta be Susie, right down to the purple hair, purple dinosaur thing. And Luca's a little bit punchy. I think that's fair to say. Then we have Marl. Who is Marl in the world of Deltarune? And this is where I think we can really tighten in the king, queen, princess thematics and really go like, okay, we have evidence textually from chapters 1 and 2 about king and queen. We have the evidence in Hometown of Carol and Rudy viewing themselves as essential to the day-to-day operations of Hometown. So much so that Carol is willing to break the laws and the rules to do it. And so much so that Rudy feels, let's just say his health really is as bad as it is. Rudy clearly thinks it's so important that he hangs the lights because the festival's not the festival without Rudy Holiday's lights. And then we even have that little tagline of everybody loves holidays, which is, frankly, a cocky tagline for your family to have. Like, really think about that. If someone said that in real life, you'd be like, yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. Everybody loves you guys. Yep, absolutely. So I think with all of this, and even just some of the outfitting choices, and there's some other people that Noelle fits with, but I think Noelle visually shares some similarities with Marl. And so I think we have Chris as Chrono, Susie as Luca, Noelle as Marl, and then Rousey. Who's Rousey? I came up with Frog. I wasn't sure about this one, but then I thought about it more. I was like, yeah, kind of, right? Because like we've got certain big key questions. For example, Frog's true nature was a little bit in question, although like it wasn't hard to guess that Frog was a dude and that this was a retelling of the Frog Prince story, right? That is what's going on there. But the other thing that goes on in Chrono Trigger is a power awakening arc. The Hero's Medal story that precedes the Magus fight and getting the Masamune. Frog awakens to his true powers during the course of this journey, as it appears Rousey has during Chapter 5. Or Rousey is keeping it secret from us, the player. Different live consideration, but we'll leave it more with powers are awakening. I think that's certainly fair to say. Gaster and the Forgotten Men. I think that they are the gurus, particularly Gaspar. I think an interesting comparison here is Gaspar always hangs out in front of a light pole, and the Forgotten Man always hangs out behind of a tree. And they are a little bit cryptic. Gaspar is a lot more straightforward than either Gaster or Forgotten Man. But there's a lot of questions around how they get there. Most importantly, especially with Gaster, the Guru of Time, he did, in fact, get shattered across space and time by the Mammon Machine. All three of the Gurus get sucked into the Mammon Machine, and then they get sent to different time periods. One to 1000 AD, one to 2300 AD, and then Gaspar gets sent to the end of time. Balthazar goes to 2300, and Melchior goes to 1000 AD. I think I got those right. And the three gurus, going back to thematics and using old elements, that is essentially the three wise men out of the Bible, the thematics of the three wise men being retold through the three gurus. And then now Toby has turned Gaspar into Gaster. And so like when we are looking at thematic morphing, parallel narratives, that's where we're going from. So yes, am I connecting Gaster back to the three wise men? Yeah, kind of. Not don't think about it like that hard, all right? But like, yes, there is actually a through line, just like all dragon stories go back to Azidahakra. Then, and I think what's important there too is think about how different Gaster and the three wise men are. Not too hard, but you get where I'm going with this, right? All right, Carol Holiday. I think she mirrors Queen Zeal in many, many different ways. I think Queen Zeal is wildly ambitious. Queen Zeal is willing to do whatever is necessary to manipulate the haves and the have-nots. That is actually a big element of 12,000 AD. And there is certainly, this is a tease for a future video, a consideration of the haves and the have-nots in Hometown. Because the holidays haves, and they haves a lot more than pretty much everyone else in Hometown. Everyone lives close together in relatively small houses. The Holiday Manor is easily 2 to 3 times the size of, for example, the Kattenheimer's house, or even the dreamer's house, right? The dreamers don't have enough bedroom for their children. The holidays have so much room that they even have a basement. They have bathrooms. They got a guest room. You know, they got all sorts of stuff. We haven't even been into Carol's room yet. Guest room, I don't think it's right, but you know what I'm saying. There's a lot of stuff going on there. Rudy and Carol are the king and queen of hometown, and probably the king and queen of the festival in past years, right? Meanwhile, Queen Zeal over in the Ice Age, 12,000 AD, basically is trying to amass power. She's doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes. And people in town don't really understand, or people in the Kingdom of Zeal don't really understand what is going on with the underwater palace. Because what she is ultimately building is a thing called the Black Omen. And it's not going to be great for the people of Zeal either. I think all of these thematics around Queen Zeal and Carol Holiday suggest a pretty close thematic link. Is it fully predictive? I don't know. But if Queen Zeal gives us a text to look at for Carol Holiday, Chapter 6 and Chapter 7, especially once we get to the shelter's going to be pretty crazy, and I think the shelter is going to be akin to the underwater palace in 12,000 AD. Last, certainly not least, I made a whole video about it because two of my favorite characters in one video absolutely signed me up for this, Jevil and Magus. So go and check out that video. I want to do this real quick. We don't just have character thematics to play around with, though, if we were trying to do parallel narrative analysis. We also have plot and pacing thematics that we can look at. So in Chrono Trigger, the game starts off in 1000 AD, which is like present day in Chrono Trigger. Then we go back to 600 AD. Then after that little trip to 600 AD, we end up back in 1000 AD. Then we zip and we zop to 2300 AD in pretty short order. That brings us to the end of time. Where we run into, yes, Gaspar, and we begin to start uncovering what the nature of the real problem is. This happens right at the end of the 2300 sequence, and just like in Cyber City, we'll talk about that here in a second, we do find out about the night in earnest there, right? Then we have a couple of other missing beats here. I'm going to circle back to those after I bring us around with the Deltarune stuff. So now, Deltarune, how's it start off? Light World. Light World is like the equivalent of our 1000 AD in Deltarune. Then we have Card Kingdom. This is the recent past, right? We are blasting back to the past, but not so far back into the past. This is our 600. Then we come back to the Light World. We go back to Cyber City. That is like our 2300, right? Then we come back and we go to the end of time. Now, Tenna is the end of time? Bear with me here. Tenna is really when we first meet the knight. So this is the discovery of the real problem. We get a little bit of foreshadowing of it at the end of Chapter 2 in Cyber City, but we get the Tenna and the knight reveal after that. Game moves on and moves in its own directions, but there's two key plot beats that I want to circle back to. The Ice Age. The Ice Age is mentioned in the text of Deltarune, and the Ice Age is incredibly important thematically to Chrono Trigger. So, I certainly expect the Ice Palace that has been teased in Chapter 3 and onward to be a real place that we are going to, because it ties back to the thematics of Chrono Trigger very strongly, and I think that sets us up for Chapter 7. With the shelter being the analogy for the underground palace, which is actually a place where you can fight Lavos too. So I think Toby's sort of making thematically an abbreviated version of Chrono Trigger. We started off with the opening of it, and then we are, for the ending, going to probably go to those two beats. But you know what? It's Tortoises all the way down. I had to make the joke, right? Gerson's a tortoise. And once I found the line, I was like, oh, yeah, Tortoises all the way down. It's parallels on top of parallels on top of parallels on top of parallels. And I'm going to apologize in advance for the serpentine sentences that are about to follow. Dragon Blazers actually kind of connects back to Brandish too, because they both have a song called Glacier. They are both kind of compositionally similar with this usage of a descending pattern that I don't want to bore everyone to tears breaking down here. And then if you want to take this all the way around, Glacier actually connects us back to Cyber City, because if you listen to Pandora's Palace, the arpeggio pattern that is happening in the harpsichord in the background bears a striking resemblance back to Glacier, which I think only further confirms the Ice Age themes and the Ice Age thematic. So this is to say I'm shooting my shot. We're going to the Holiday Mansion next chapter, y'all, and I think like this is the Ice Palace that we are taking a look at. Then we have Dragon Blazers is kind of like Undertale. You and Vero-kun explained how battles work to Noel. I get it. It's kind of like Dragon Blazers. And if we're nice to you, we can win through mercy. Yeah, this is different from Brandish, but this is obviously like Undertale. Undertale is like Brandish. Deltarune is like Undertale in this sense, blah, 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 blah. All right. Then we have these blocks look like something from Dragon Blazers. I'm going to tell you something about those block puzzles. They look like something from Brandish. So Dragon Blazers and Brandish, once again connected, and Undertale uses the same block puzzle. So those block puzzles come from Brandish. They went to Undertale. They ended up in Dragon Blazers. They're also in Deltarune in Cyber City. This is what I am talking about, turtles all the way down. These blocks you could write a whole discourse on. It would not be the most interesting discourse that was ever written, but you certainly could. Then we have Birdly. This is like my favorite one because this one's so unrepentingly stupid, but it also makes an excellent point for me to end off on. Birdly, as the sister who is cursed and has bad stats. This is a good example of fundamentally changing key elements while retaining parallel narrative structures between Dragon Blazers 2, in and of itself borrowing a thematic trope of this whole has bad stats thing, which comes from many different video games, and it's borrowing that into Deltarune. I wrote Undertale, I have no idea. And then... well, yeah, here's the quote for this. It's like when your sister gets cursed in Dragon Blazers 2. Even if her stats suck, she's still your party member. Susie, a real Dragon Blazers 2 reference. Susie, you're not only kind, but you're a true gamer as well. All right, that brings us to the end of the video. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. Like, subscribe for more excellent content such as this. Music recommendation this time, Wah Wah Watson, Elementary. Dude's the king of wah guitar. I think you will enjoy this. What an excellent, excellent player. Definitely doesn't get his due. So, like, let's make him a thing. I don't know. Why not? All right. Like, subscribe. Have a great day.